So hello everybody, it's time to report back about what I did in the studio and what new gear I got for the more infrastructure like things. And the last video I did about that is quite some time ago, and back then I looked in how to get up to 64 even more input channels into your DAW, and I decided on a Fireface A32 Pro via Dante, and I used the software virtual audio card on Windows for Dante, and this worked surprisingly very well. But after some time I missed a bit to have a proper mix of that, and I was also eyeing on an RME UFX III. Yeah, the solution was to put one in front of the Firefish, so you have even more input channels now. I also have connected three Behringer ADA 8200 to the setup and have now plenty of input channels, including a proper mixer. But first, let's have a look what's in the box. And beside the device itself, you find a really proper manual, which is rare these days. And you also get plenty of cables, which is also a rare thing. So you get all the different USB versions. So pretty helpful to get you started, and you don't have to buy straight away new cables for it. But I also got the remote control, and I can absolutely say you should get that as well. It's very helpful to be able to control the volume as well as to call up different setups of that, and all the buttons are all configurable, and you can put different functions like muting or dimming onto them. A little drawback is that the connection is via a USB cable, so you have the usual restrictions of USB cable length, which I think it's USB 2, so you should be able to get up to 5 meters, but no more than that. After some days, I noticed that actually the main knob is not working at all, which is easy to overlook because you can control all the functionality from the software. But if you ever want to run it standalone, which is also possible to do some live recording, for example, which is also possible to USB stick, it's totally necessary to have also the knobs working. So I put it into the repair service, and this worked really nicely. They even offered a replacement device, which I did not need at the time, and after 2 weeks it came back and they had figured it out to work it out. Actually, it was only missing a cable connection, and since then it's running nicely and properly. So what can you do with the software? I have here running the new beta version of TotalMix, and the new beta version gives you a needless zooming of the size, so it has no longer a fixed size, and it also has some easier to read coloring of the channels. You can now easier spot what is on which channels, so especially if you have lots of channels, it's easier to get an idea where is what. Yeah, you can control here with the remote control the volume, as you see. You can also mute it, and you can call up the different setups. And the setups I'm using, the first setup is a normal DAW setup, so everything goes into the DAW and you cannot hear it without the DAW, so everything is routed through the DAW. And the second setup is then that I can play my synths, my hardware synths, without having to run a DAW, so you can pre-listen everything. And finally, the third setup is for recording vocals, where I have zero latency monitoring on the headphones, which it gets straight out of the audio interface. And you can also add some effects to them. The UFX brings some reverb, delay effects, as well as an EQ, which is pretty helpful if you record your vocals. Also some really nice things for Windows users. So I test this here on Windows is you can set the ASIO latency down to 32 samples, but also up to 2048, which is pretty helpful if you mix heavy project with lots of plugins on there. And what is also nice is that you can configure which inputs and outputs are used by the normal Windows audio system. Because if you remember the Corona days where you had to do lots of video conferencing, most of the conferencing software allows you only to use the first microphone input, which is fixed. So you need to have microphone input on channel 1. And also here on UFX, it's not on channel 1, it's channel 9, if I remember correctly. And here you can configure which of the inputs you want to have where, and so you can make this work as well. So pretty helpful on Windows. Another nice thing for Windows users is that the ASIO drivers are actually multi-client, and this is really big news. So you can run Cubase, Bitwig, Reaper, whatever you want at the same time via the interface, and this works really great. And this is especially nice if I do some videos where I need to show multiple doors, and yeah, you can do that. So much for RME UFX 3. I'm running it now for 1.5 years without any issues besides the first cable issue in the beginning, and it's totally rock solid. Drivers are great, and yeah, absolutely worth buying. So second thing is a total infrastructure thing, and I think totally worth getting as well. I ran also for several years Furman PL-Pro DMCE. Yeah, they love weird names, which is a power conditioner and multi-stage protection. And I think something like this is totally worth getting if you have synthesizers and studio equipment for several thousand euros or dollars, or what your currency is, and then you should totally invest in such a thing to protect your audio gear. And the best thing I can report about it is that I simply did not notice it in all the time I used it. But I had some issues in the last times because I have lots of equipment with blowing out the fuse if I turn on all the stuff. So what I had to do is to turn on devices one after another, or in at least in a specific sequence, and it was always quite a hassle and had to remember what to turn on first and such things. And then I ran into a discussion about this issue on a forum, and it turns out there is actually a solution for that, which I could not find so far. And also a device from Furman, I'm not sure how they are exactly pronounced, American company, and they have a device which is also a sequencer. So it gives you the same features as my previous PL Pro device, but this one turns on devices in a specific sequence. And as you see in the back, it has 3 different pairs, actually 4. So 2 turn on when you switch on the device, and then a sequence happens which turns on then the first, the second, and the third pairs with a specific delay, which you can configure. The default is set to 5 seconds, but you can increase that up to 10 seconds or lower it, I think, to 1 second, or about that range. And that's the delay time that is weighted between these different pairs getting turned on. It has also much more features. You can also connect multiple of these devices, and they have a specific connection for remote control connections and things like that, which I don't need. The only little drawback in contrast to the previous device is that it doesn't have a display to show you the current amount of power that is drawn, and you don't see the actual power frequency. Yeah, it took me a bit to get the correct connections, so what to put on which pair to not blow out the fuse again. In the beginning, it's the easy things like computers, which don't draw that much power, and in the end it's your audio monitors. But I also noticed that the computer monitors are also causing an issue, so I also put them on a separate level of these 3 things. One little drawback I noticed is that strangely the first stage is executed pretty soon after switching it on, so it seems not to wait the 5 seconds until the first one turns on. It looks more like a second, but nevertheless I can cope with that. But the second waits definitely these 5 seconds, which turns on my computer rack, and then the third one finally turns on the audio monitors. Also, when I switch it off now, it's also a sequence, a very fast one, so I think it's about 1 second, which is waited between the shutdown of each pair, which helps you to get rid of this popping effect you might get when turning off everything at once out of your audio monitors. It's not cheap, it's about 500 euros to get such a device, but it's an absolutely game changer because I can now turn on my whole studio with one button and don't have to think or anything to make everything work at once. Last but not least, I finally got some new audio monitors. I was looking for audio monitors for the last 10 years and could not find anything that really made me happier than my current event TR8 I had previously. And you might have seen the video where I visited my good friend Bert from Switzerland in summer holidays, and he had the Adam A8H monitors, which are pretty new. I think they got released end of last year or early this year, and yeah, I fell in love with them. The little issue I had with my previous monitors was they lacked a little bit of bass, and I was worried to get a subwoofer because my room is not that big, my studio room, and yeah, so I was a little bit worried to have too much bass then. And yeah, listening to these monitors, they really felt right. They have some really nice bass, which you can also reduce, and you can store hardware profiles into the monitors, which is pretty helpful. You don't have to run any specific software for it. So I decided to get them. So the H in the name means actually horizontally. So the idea is that you position the speakers horizontally, but you can also position them vertically. For that, they suggest that you turn by 90 degrees the highest speaker, and you need to be quite careful with that and to not damage it in any way. And they suggest to have some wrap over it, and you should absolutely do that because it's really easy to hit it somehow with a screwdriver, and yeah, that should not happen at all. And also it's a bit dangerous that a screw is falling onto it, so absolutely do that. Besides that, it's pretty easy to do. You just turn out the screws, and then to grab it, it's a bit difficult. I went in with the screwdriver and pulled it a bit to remove the speaker, and then you can turn it by 90 degrees and put it back in there and position back the screws, and you are done with running it vertically. Yeah, what can I say? It's hard to test monitors in a video because you always have to listen to them best in your room. But nevertheless, what I want to show is the configuration, and the configuration was quite a hassle. Because if you want to get a measurement to store in them, you need to use third-party software, which I think is a big drawback. And you have to get the Sonarworks software for that. I guess you could use others, but you need something which can write their format, which you can load into the monitors, and this plugin can produce this format. You get it for free for 60 days, so can use it in these 60 days, which I did to get me started. And then you can buy it, I think it's around 300 something euros, so quite expensive software, which I honestly think was not the best software in the world. And yeah, I do not really have a need for that, so you can go without that. So I did the initial measuring, and the first tough thing was to find the impulse response for the microphone, for the measurement microphone, where I used good old Behringer microphone, which I also used only once for measuring my previous monitor, so it's totally sufficient to get one. And you can buy one from them, and everything is set up for their microphone. But if you need a profile for a third-party microphone, it's pretty tough to find, which I could finally do in the end. And after you load that in, the process is then done pretty nicely, but you need to bring some time. So it gives you explanations how you need to set up, where you need to put everything, and then you basically walk around in the room to get the different measurements, and your position is recognized automatically via the microphone, which is pretty impressive to see. And one tip they did not give is to wear ear protection during this process, because it issues pretty annoying and horrible sine waves, pretty loud ones actually as well, and the measurement process takes quite a while, so if I remember correctly, 15 or 20 minutes. And yeah, you should protect your ears in that process. It's, yeah, I can tell you, it's really annoying, and I was not prepared for that. So after that, it's quite a bit of a hassle, because you need to bring in this result into their plugin and then find out how to export it. And yeah, this took me also quite some time, and it was working on this stuff for several hours until I finally could load in this impulse response into the monitors. And then I did some comparison listening, and I have to say they really sound really nice. If you just turn them on out of the box, they really sound great. And then I loaded in the impulse response, and yeah, it was totally transparent, very nice, flat response, but also a bit boring because it reduced quite a lot of the bass, for which I actually bought the. So what I did in the end is use the third option, that you have also an EQ in there, and I just reduced a bit of the boomy bass, so it's more transparent. And yeah, that's what I'm running now. That's really nice. You have a bit of bass, but not overwhelming one. And yeah, if you want to check a mix, you can go to the profile, but I think it's a bit boring to listen to, but that's up to taste. Yeah, so that's the state at the end of 2025, and I think that's a big step forward, and even the sheep and the pigs love it. And until next time, make some funky music.